But first, I'm going to welcome. There's 69 people here, and I'm really excited. I didn't realize how much I missed the Salty seminar, so I'm really excited for tonight to hear from our esteemed guests that have circumnavigated Great Salt Lake in this time of change. And I think a lot of people have been experiencing a time of change. I know that you might see that instead of that beautiful kind of sunroom I used to be in, I'm now in a 30-foot travel trailer. I moved to my family farm in the Cache Valley, and we're living in a trailer while we're building a house in a barn. So this summer has been pretty profound, I think, for a lot of people in thinking about this change of Great Salt Lake that we're seeing. And I would like to recognize that this is a time of change for many people. And Bonnie and I recently were able to take a flight over Great Salt Lake, and we were able to experience the lake like the birds, like the ravens that Scott talked about wanting to fly over the lake. And we kind of felt like, I don't know, I felt like a special guest over the lake as a bird. And Bonnie, chime in on any of these that you want.
Yeah, sure.
We started our journey over the wetlands kind of near Bountiful, and we quickly saw this pretty dry expanse that is Farmington Bay now. I actually took these pictures. There's some, I think these were pelicans that we saw on the lake. So you can kind of get a perspective of how high we were. This is the Marina at Antelope Island. It's high and dry. I have a lot of great memories catching grebes right in this area where now boats can't even go. Not even Matt and Scott's kayaks could get into the Marina. They would have to carry it over large mud flats. And you can see these reefs, these microbialite structures that have been exposed. And I have been telling people, I really think that this summer, if I were to characterize it as anything, is the summer of the microbialites. And I think none of us really realized how low the lake would go until this spring. And now we're here and we're experiencing this place. This is Ladyfinger Point on Antelope Island. This is where Bonnie and I do a lot of the studies on microbialites, and you can see these large dry areas. And just this beach, I mean, this is like where people are supposed to go swimming, and you have to walk over a mile to get in there. And we saw just lots of different things while we were there. These are different structure, different kinds of these microbialites that we saw that maybe are a little bit less organized and kind of clumpy, to these that look like polygons. I want you to pay attention to this one right here, because you can see these dark kind of polygons that are on the bed of the lake underneath the water. And what they look like when they're exposed. So the pilot, Andy Wallace, I hope Andy's on right now. Andy talked about their noses poking out of the water. And it really looked like troll noses that were poking out of the water. And you'll see that they're not only beached, they're bleached now. So it's kind of like—
Jamie, if you think about that last picture that you have, they're really not covered by more than maybe 6 inches of water. So even the ones that are underwater are really close to the surface.
And we really meant to take this trip and look at microbialites. And so we concentrated on all of these different forms and what happens on the shorelines, or, what we're exposed. I really love this picture. These reefs, they don't just form in one way. This clearly shows how the lake currents are affecting how these microbialite and these reefs are forming with this round shape. I love this line. I mean, what do you think this line is, Bonnie? Like, it's a straight line.
I think I'd love to hear from Mike Vandenberg, but I think it's associated with like groundwater seepage, maybe faulting in the lake, because these microbialites are forming where there is calcium, because it's precipitating calcium carbonate, and the calcium is coming from underneath from the water that is seeping through these springs. So I think that's got to speak to some geological influence that I don't understand as a biologist.
And I will link you. We do have a webinar set up for November 17th at noon, talking with Michael Vandenberg from the Utah Geological Survey and Dr. Bonnie Baxter, thinking about these microbialites. So I will link you to that. This is interesting because I've always heard of this like mythical thing on the lake that's Atlantis, and the brine shrimp harvesters, they used to talk about Atlantis. And I think of it, I think it's really important that I couldn't get a clear shot of it. You'll see like here's the plane, the shadow of the plane, and then here's, I'm going to call it Saltlantis. And I think that it's like something super special on the bottom of Great Salt Lake. There's springs out there. These are springs along Freeman Island. I mean, now Freeman Island, you can bike to or kayak to and spend time out there, and you can go visit these springs. Just beautiful shorelines. This is the north side of Freeman Island. Just these beautiful waves that we found with kind of some evidence of microbialites. I like this picture because this shows here's the causeway right here. And then this is Promontory Point. And so we're looking at this vast exposed microbialite field. And then this is where the landfill on Promontory Point is supposed to go. I thought that was a really profound picture for like looking at how close that this landfill is supposed to be to Great Salt Lake. This is
I think that's important because it's also really near some faulting in the lake, and you know, the idea that we could store heavy metals that close to a fault where earthquakes might compromise the safety of the landfill. I think that's like a really important point. And also these sort of hatched squares are all microbialites around the white that are becoming exposed, but those are primary producers for the lake. So they're that close to a landfill is a little scary.
And I do have to say, somebody said in the comments, like a small bright spot in the drought. And I do appreciate, despite me not wanting to see them, I do appreciate that I have been able to see more of the structures of the microbialites with this drought. And I think that another bright spot is that people know the word microbialite now, and people have, you know, been thinking about the primary productivity in Great Salt Lake. And this is a brine shrimp harbor. You'll notice how they've had to dredge all of this. I really love this image of this green north arm water or south arm water and the pink north arm water. And here's the railroad causeway that splits the lake into two. And then you'll see this line right here. Never have I ever seen the Barron's Trench. This is the Barron's Trench that brings salt to mineral companies, and it's just an open trench that's on the bottom of Great Salt Lake that you can now see exposed. And I think I've enjoyed kind of being able to see this trench that brings so much of the minerals back to these mineral companies. And, you know, it's not just the south arm microbialites that we looked at. We looked at these microbialites that are in the salt saturated north arm of Great Salt Lake. And we know that these microbialites are no longer growing. They probably are like an apartment building, and microbes might live on them, but they're not actively building. So a lot of these structures have already been impacted by high salt content. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Spiral Jetty. You can see Spiral Jetty right here in this kind of left middle part of your screen, and the tar seeps that we study. It's a long freaking way to get from Spiral Jetty to the water.
0.85 miles.
Yeah, it's very, how many steps was it?
I don't remember in steps. 0.85 miles. Yeah.
Yeah, and all these, I thought this one looked like warty little microbialites on the surface of the lake. This is, I don't know, like Burning Man must have been, this was like the Burning Man of microbialites right here, that with all of these like circular structures that are out there. And maybe some of you go birding at Farmington Bay. I like this overhead shot of the Farmington Bay Nature Education Center in the parking lot and kind of all of these dikes. And I guess, we're really concerned right now because we're watching this lake go down and down and down and down and down. And I want you to notice, I met the lake in probably 1986 at one of the highest levels. But notice how these lowest levels have keep continuing to get lower. 1963 get lower. And then again this year, we got even lower. So October 18th was the very lowest historic low ever of Great Salt Lake. We hit a new historic low every day from July until October. And to put this into perspective on this year, because a lot of times I show people this graph and they say, oh, well, we're just going to go up again. Like, it's okay, the lake is just going to go up again. The US Geological Survey in a meeting yesterday kind of put this into perspective. So every year we gain 1 to 5 feet. On average, we gain about 2.2 feet. That's a 20-year average. We gain 2.2 feet of water in the season. The 20-year average for what we lose is about 2.3 feet on average. So, we're losing 0.1 feet on average every year. This year, we did not gain the average of 2.2 feet. We increased in surface elevation by 1 foot. And then we decreased in surface elevation by 2.8 feet. So we lost a lot. And then if anybody were to kind of make projections, well, what they said is we would need an amazing snow year to even gain a 2-foot increase. And so, we're still looking at some pretty dismal lake levels at Great Salt Lake. And I have to say that in some of the meetings I've been in that are like the nerdiest meetings that you could ever go to, I hope that nobody thinks bad of me. I really love them. Scientists are talking and saying words like praying and hoping, and my fingers are crossed. And it is very striking to me, and I think worth noting. So now, you don't want to listen to me. You guys always listen to me. I've been talking in the media all the time, and we're really here to hear from Scott and Matt. So these are some of our rules. Not rules, guidelines. You should at the bottom of your screen have 2 boxes. One is a Q&A box, and in that you can ask questions, any questions that you want. If you keep your Q&A box open, you can upvote any questions that people ask, so we know what other people are wondering, and that will prioritize that question. I see a lot of people in the chat, and keep chatting it up. I'll be putting links. We'll be answering, questions and having discussions in that chat box kind of on the side. And then there's a QR code that's in the bottom right hand of your screen. If you put your camera on that QR code, it's going to take you to a little form. If you want to be on our email list, if you have topics that you want to explore, if you have somebody that you think really should be on a Salty seminar, let us know. We would love to hear your thoughts. All of this goes to YouTube. So in fact, we're live on YouTube now, and the QR code is at the top of the screen. You can type in Great Salt Lake Institute and go to our page. I use playlists to organize all of the all of my videos. So if you go to playlist, you can look for videos on spiral jetty or videos on brine shrimp. So use that as a resource. We do have a couple of events that are coming up. On Friday, the River Riding Collective and Nan Seymour is we're going to have like a little writing workshop on Antelope Island from 3 to 4:30. And then some of us are going to stay overnight too. So, come join us. Think about, putting your thoughts about Antelope Island and Great Salt Lake on a paper or even into words. I think it's going to be really important during this legislative session to be putting our thoughts and opinions into things that people can use. Microbialite madness. And so because this is the year of the microbialite, I think we've seen this really awesome thing happening where we're watching science happen as a process right in front of our eyes. And so there's lots of questions. I think there's some misinformation. I think that there's a lot of nuances that we're going to unpack on November 17th from noon to 1. Again, it's all free. It's a webinar format, just like this is. And we'll be talking to scientists directly during all of that time. And what else did I want to tell you? Mostly I just want, I do have a links and resources page for you. All of the links and resources that go into the chat tonight are going to go onto this Google document that's kind of this living organism that we put all of the information into. You can download the Great Salt Lake Biology book that Bonnie and I edited. There's tons of different things there. So use this links and resources. And so now I think we did pretty good, Bonnie. It's only 7:18.
Yes. So I do, if you could get off your slideshow, I just want to say one thing before you introduce Scott, which is Scott Baxter has been using my name. And we're not married, even though people keep asking me that. But I'm sure we're related by some Baxters back in Scotland. And I put on this cowboy hat today just to like play the song. I just want to say there's only room for one Baxter on Great Salt Lake.
No, the lake needs more Baxters.
I just want to bring that up. I couldn't find the Josie Wales soundtrack, but that's all I could do.
I do have cowboy hats, so I can play this game too.
I just want to welcome my brother from another mother from the homeland to the stage tonight with his colleague Matt. And Jamie, I can turn it over to you and Dave to do the formal introductions.
Well, I fortunately don't have a formal introduction. It's really awesome to have a very informal introduction. So Matt Kahabka, I just met him very recently, and tonight is the first night I'm actually even seeing his face. And Matt was a professional chemical engineer and has now left this job, and maybe we'll have to go back to it to make money. I'm not really sure, Matt, but is mostly an outdoor enthusiast. So anything that involves outdoors and like anything, what Scott says is Matt does anything that is painful. So backpacking, cross-country cycling, climbing, kayaking. 3 days before he left on this journey, Matt had finished a 112-mile trek over the Wind Rivers. He very much loves to push and challenge himself. And Scott likes to say that Matt is just one of the most curious people that he knows, and was a perfect companion on this trip to circumnavigate and document a shrinking Great Salt Lake. And I have to say that when Scott told me about this trip and he told me about Matt, he told me that Matt is his daughter's boyfriend. And I was like, oh man, there could be a lot of wrong that happens. Like, what if you don't like each other? What if you don't get along?
What if he's just trying to be a Baxter?
Exactly.
Yeah. No kidding.
And fortunately it didn't go sideways. It actually went really great, and Scott definitely appreciated Matt and his curiosity and his ability to withstand pain on this trip. And Scott Baxter was actually in international business. He's done a lot of things in the bird world and has always spent a ton of time at Great Salt Lake. He was the president of Great Salt Lake Audubon. He was working with linking partners. He had a hand in the fabulous Great Salt Lake Bird Festival. And he's also a well-known kayaker and kayak designer. Scott has paddled all over the world, from Japan and Europe and South America, all over the world. And Scott keeps telling me he's not a scientist, and I really don't believe him. I think that he's a scientist. And I also would encourage people, while Scott and Matt are talking, to listen to his prose. I know that poets have complimented Scott's prose, and so I'm really excited to bring Scott and Matt. I'm going to turn my camera off and let Scott and Matt take us on a journey around Great Salt Lake. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There we go. And does that look right to everybody else?
Yeah, it looks great, Scott.
Okay, great. Well, it's exciting to be here. It's just exciting to still be alive after this trip we just took. And we want to share with you, more than anything else, I think, the experience. We will share some of the science and whatnot, but we're not the scientists, and we've got great opportunities, I think, coming up to hear from the people that really know what they're talking about on the lake. But I thought we'd start just by building a little bit of a foundation for the lake and this trip and how it came about. So I love to kayak. I build kayaks, I paddle kayaks. People think I'm a little bit fanatical that way. And one of the most common questions I get is why? Why do you like to kayak so much? And there's a lot of reasons to kayak. And I think what captures it best for me, so the kayak was really developed in Greenland and Alaska with the native peoples in that area. And in Greenland, the word they have for kayak is sargat. And sargat, the literal meaning of sargat is a means to wander. And for me, that's why I kayak. It gives me a great means to wander in places that I wouldn't be able to otherwise. And to me, that's the big motivation for kayaking. I've paddled on the lake for about 30 years. My kids were raised paddling on the lake. Some of these places you might recognize, these are Sanderlings just off of Ladyfinger Point, when the lake was much deeper than it is right now. This is up at the oil slick that Jamie showed in overhead pictures. This is some of the industrial stuff left there. And this is just a sunset on Bridger Bay, one of the most spectacular places to see a sunset in Utah. And as we paddled on the lake, the trend was obvious, and Jamie did a great job of showing that in the graph. Lake was definitely trending down, and several years ago, I kind of made a personal commitment to myself, and I've shared it with some close friends and with my children and stuff, but I planned to circumnavigate the lake when it hit a record low, a historic low. And I really didn't know why I was going to do that, but I just knew it was something I was going to do. One thing we want to do is make everybody that's listening feel a little bit involved. And I'm going to take a little bit of a detour, a huge detour for me, into an area that's a little bit uncomfortable. Jamie and Bonnie have a tendency to do that to people. I've heard a lot of stories of people trying to dig their shoes out of the mud 3 feet below them on shores of the lake. And right now, I'd rather do that, I think, than what I'm about to do. But to get some participation from everybody, we're going to try something. I get to tell a fairy tale. And part of this fairy tale, you'll have a job to do, and I'll explain that as I go. And if you win in this contest, you will win a child's book. It's called The Great Salt Lake Monster Mystery, written by Jamie and Bonnie. So that's the prize that you win. So we want some good participation here. I'm going to move my camera just temporarily so I can see my screen a little bit better. So this could be the sequel to the Great Salt Lake Monster Mystery. A lot of people think that the Great Salt Lake Monster is fictional, that it's just part of the folklore of the lake, but that's not true. The Salt Lake Monster is real. We found her. This was in one of those low years that Jamie was pointing out at the graph when the water was quite low, and we paddled through that area several times. In fact, it's a tradition, more or less, to paddle down there on New Year's Day. And this was New Year's Day in 2018. And we found the Great Salt Lake Monster. And what we found out is she's actually pretty nice. She's not a mean monster. She likes having her horns scratched, but she has a problem. She was never given a name. Her parents had died and she never received a name. And that's where you guys come in. We need to give the Great Salt Lake Monster a name. So start sending your messages in, and Jamie will be coordinating this whole thing and help us give the monster name. And I'm really confident, being in Utah, that we can succeed at this. I've worked in probably 25, 30 countries, and the most intimidating rosters I've ever seen as far as knowing how to pronounce names on the rosters are field trips from kids in Utah. This state, I mean, they use letters that aren't even in the alphabet in some of the names they come up with. So I'm sure we've got people in the audience that can come up with the names. So as I'm telling the fairy tale, be messaging in names. Whoever wins the name contest wins the book. And our hosts will work their magic and determine a way to kind of make it fun in selecting the best name too. So the lake has a lot of magical places, and this particular one is guarded by a sea monster that's always hungry, but this sea monster doesn't eat children. She mostly eats algae from the lake. And algae is not a real fun thing to eat all the time, so she does have some favorite treats. She likes Brussels sprouts, she likes spinach, and she likes strawberry chocolates. So the key to getting past the Great Salt Lake Monster is to bring one of those treats with you and give them to the monster, and then scratch her horns, because her horns get really itchy in the salt water. She likes her horns scratched, and then she'll let you go by. And once you've given her the treat, you can get to the land, and you'll find a trail there that winds down the shore. And the next thing you run into is a dragon. And here you can see the dragon. This is the back of the dragon, and here's the horns. And here's the nose and the mouth. I don't know if you can see my pointer or not, and the chin and the jawbone. And like the sea monster, the dragon also is friendly, and the dragon has favorite treats, and he really only has one favorite treat. It's pizza. And if you take a slice of pizza and give it to the dragon, he'll let you pass. And then you go down a meandering trail, and you turn a corner, and you see a really scary witch howling in the wind. And it's really scary. It's really scary. And it kind of stops you, and you get a lot of fear. And when you're focusing on the witch, you get this really uncomfortable feeling that you're being watched and it's not the witch. And eventually you feel the direction that that's coming from, and you turn to the east, and you see off on the cliff to the east, you see the witch's mother frozen in the rock. And that's what the story's about. And the story is about a beautiful lake that once existed here that was about 1,000 feet deep. Big fish lived in the lake, and birds came from all over the world to visit the lake and to eat the food around the lake. And the summers were pleasant. They weren't hot like they are now, and the rain was more plentiful, so the plants were more lush. It was a beautiful time, and the witch wasn't always a witch. She was a beautiful woman at one time, and she lived with her mother, and they discovered the lake, and they decided to build a house on the shore of the lake so they could enjoy this lake. And they'd they'd eat the delicious fish that were in the lake. And when they were living there, the beautiful woman learned how to make diamonds out of the water in the lake. And she'd never really had a need for diamonds, but she started making diamonds, and she loved the diamonds and she wanted more diamonds. So she kept making more and more diamonds. And as she made the diamonds, the water in the lake went lower and lower and lower. And it got to the point where the birds left because they didn't have food to eat. And eventually the water got lower and there were big mud flats that were drying out around. And Mother Nature is watching the witch the whole time. And she was being patient, hoping the witch would realize her mistake and change her ways and save the lake, which was the source of her food. But the witch and the mother both wanted more and more diamonds, and they continued to use the water to make diamonds. So Mother Nature whipped up a big windstorm across the dry mud flats and blew the sand and the dirt and the chemicals and minerals that it deposited there right towards the woman and the mother. And that's when they turned to stone. The dust turned them to stone. Eventually, the lake never came back really. It stayed low. And the rain never came back. It stayed dry, and the plants changed. They were more pokey type plants, not as green and lush. But eventually birds started coming back because there was food in the lake, not the big fish that used to be there, but tiny little flies and tiny little shrimp. And after that, people came again. These people were different than the witch and her mother. They loved the lake. They loved the land around it, and they learned how to live in this pretty hostile environment that was left. And they lived that way for about 3,000 years, pretty much in harmony with the lake. And where this story ends is eventually more people came and they built their house, their homes near the lake. And that's kind of the story we're going to talk about on this trip. The impact of what's happened as we've moved into the Wasatch Front area and started using the water that used to go to the lake. So that's my fairy tale. I hope we got some good book titles during, or good names for the sea monster during that time period. And that was not easy for me.
I do, Scott. Do you want me to do a poll? I can do a poll right now, and
yeah,
we can see like who wins.
Let's do it.
Okay. We just have to remember how to do a poll. Okay, so you should, people should see on your screen a poll. And I really, so the choices that we have, you should be able to vote on Baxter as the name of the monster, Salicornia, Salty Sally, Mirabelle, Jetty, Briny, but I had to spell it different ways because there was a suggestion that in Utah we spell our names a little bit differently. and so there's different spellings there. We've got NaCl pronounced NaCl or Hali. That's a derivative of halide.
You're missing Tempest and Lottie, Lady of the Lake.
Oh, shoot. I missed those ones because I was launching a poll. See, my technology. I'm sorry. If I missed those.
Okay, we'll go with the first one, and then we'll consider these later.
Okay, so I'm going to give you 20 more seconds according to my internal clock. And that's like the clock that I use on my daughter when I'm like, you have 30 more seconds. And then we're leaving the house. And really, I just mean until I want to leave.
Oh, Aaron is here. Aaron says Salicornia is perfect, but it's already another organism. Instead of Latin, we could try Greek. Helocaris or Heloceras. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that Briny wins. Briny with two E's.
Going for it. Yeah.
Briny with a Y-N-E-E. I like that.
We need to use one of those Utah spellings.
Utah spellings are hilarious.
No.
Oh, but see, it's changing now because Salty Sally is like 21%. Okay, I'm giving you 5 more seconds in real time. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. End poll. Oh gosh. The winner is still Briny. So I'm gonna have to be sending, oh, but Salty Sally is so close. But
It
I
is
think,
close.
I know, but I think Briny still wins.
I
Right?
do want to mention that RN is like, it's like 4:30 a.m. in Jerusalem right now. RN is closer to the Dead Sea in Jerusalem than he is to Great Salt Lake. I'm so happy you're here, RN, and I'm glad you got up early, and I'm sorry to your wife who you had to disturb to get out of bed. But
Okay, so we've got Briny and then Salty Sally, and then the next one would be Hallie, Halide.
all right, let's keep those, and maybe at the end we can do a poll including some of these other ones.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Throw
Well,
in
now
it.
that I've got that behind me, the rest of it's easy.
I love it, Soren. Simon says, let's throw in a T and make it silent. Like I haven't seen that in a million student names. That's perfect.
Okay. I am going to put in a plug here. Great Salt Lake Institute is involved with the River Riding Group this Friday night out at Antelope Island, and they're doing Jamie, help me. It's basically a riding class slash it's just a group of riders getting out and working with each other riding. Is that a good definition for it?
Yeah, and I think, Nan, who is the director, the founder of River Riding Collective, does a lot of workshops and kind of helps you find your written voice and even your spoken voice if you have some things that you want to explore about the lake. I think it would be a really fun time. So it'll be guided. If you don't know what you're doing, I'm going to be right there with you. I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm just going to workshop this with this incredible person named Nan. And Soren asks, is that writers or writers? And it's writers that write either on a computer. I'm using my Utah accent of writers. So we will be writing on paper.
Okay, and I'm going to apologize to Nan right now for my lack of creativity and ability to display that in doing the fairy tale to introduce the event, but I think I may go out there myself. Obviously, I could use some help in that department. So now that I've got that behind me, going back to our lake, so I continued to paddle with friends and family, and the lake continued to recede. That picture on the right, some of you may recognize. It was the cover of Utah Life magazine about 2 years ago today. Actually, it came out in late November, as I recall. In fact, it's an interesting picture to look at. So what you're seeing, this is actually off the west side of Antelope Island. And my daughter Heidi had just pulled her kayak off and spun it around as she pulled it off. And the lighter color in that mud is actually the lytic sand. And we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. And the reddish stuff is a combination of decaying brine shrimp and the brine shrimp cysts, or the brine shrimp eggs that have gathered on the shore. It was, I think this trip was in November, so it was this time of year essentially when we were out there. So we continued to paddle, continued to learn, continued to explore. As mentioned, I build kayaks. I continued to build kayaks. The kayak here in the middle is actually one of them that went on the trip. Her name is Naughty Aspen, spelled K with KN, not an NAU. The wood in the deck is aspen. It has knots in it. The boat is in my Avocet collection, named after the American Avocet, along with this boat clear over on the far right. The boat on the far left and the boat next to the one on the far right is actually also named after a bird, and its name is Cavia murr. And you've got to be a pretty hardcore birder to know what that name is. If John Neal's on the on the line listening, he probably didn't even think twice when I said that name, but for most of us, it's the scientific name for the common loon. So my birds my kayaks get named after birds quite frequently. Explored more, and one thing that's interesting is there's vast wetlands around the Great Salt Lake. In fact, 80% of the wetlands in Utah are on the east and south shore of the Great Salt Lake, and that was definitely part of my exploring and part of my photography. I do spend a lot of time out on the water with $12,000 worth of camera gear in my kayak, and so far I haven't gone over with it. Let's hope that let's hope that continues. This picture top right's kind of interesting. A lot of you have been up on top of Buffalo Point and looked south and seen the elephant's head with the trunk going to the water. That's what the trunk actually looks like when you're close to it. The shorelines, as they get further and further out, it gets harder and harder to get a kayak out to them. And you can put a kayak on a cart, but in that oolitic sand, the wheels just sink in the sand. So one of our favorite things to do is get out right after a snowstorm when we can just slide the kayaks over the snow. You know, I started really looking at everything about the lake, and the big things, the small things. This is pictures of some of the brine shrimp around the lake, largely magnified along with their cysts or eggs. Right next to the brine shrimp, in a few places in this left picture, you can see a couple brine shrimp eggs there next to them for correlation of size. And all these really white round things are oolitic sand, and it's an interesting kind of sand. And again, this is pretty highly magnified, but I call it the world's first disposable diaper. What happens is calcium carbonate precipitates out of the water quite often around a piece of organic matter, which quite often is a brine shrimp poop. And it makes concentric rings of the calcium carbonate as it works out and builds. And there's actually a few different types in here. We won't go into those details, but really fascinating sand. The picture in the bottom right is what it looks like on the beach, although this, again, is greatly magnified. And the other two are cross sections that I've made of the sand over time. The next one's getting more in the Bonnie's area. These pictures I took, there was a big windstorm once, and it was so big that it pushed up a lot of organic matter, even in the Marina on Antelope Island. I have no idea what this thing on the top right is. I made sure not to touch that end that's right at the top of the picture, but you can see brine shrimp larvae in a few places. There's or brine fly, excuse me. There's I think an adult brine fly is what that is. I don't know what these things with the two dots on them are. Some of the people may know, and if they know, put a message out and we'll all know. But really started to explore a lot of things most people wouldn't poke with a stick. And Dave, this picture in the lower right's for you. There's a lot of interesting things on the lake. The picture on the left is taken out on Buffalo Point, actually. And there's a natural cement that precipitates out of the water and covers the rocks quite often. And a lot of this really goes back years, maybe 3,000, 9,000 years ago. And we're really not sure. I mean, scientifically, they know mechanically how this happens, what triggered it and why it didn't continue, or if it did continue. There's a lot of questions on that type of stuff. It also glued together conglomerates, and you get some crazy erosion in the rock up there that's really interesting too. And this is the pickleweed that was mentioned earlier. If you were listening just before the meeting started, turns a beautiful red color in the fall. The Native Americans, the Shoshone, used to eat the seeds off the pickleweed. I always wondered, how could they collect the seeds off the pickleweed in any way that would give them more calories than they burn collecting them? And one day I was paddling, and there was a major storm, a major rain event the day before. And it was when the seeds were ready to fall off the plant, and the whole surface of the water was just covered with seeds from these plants, and where it washed up, they were really thick. And my hunch is they probably waited till after a good storm and walked along the beach and gathered them. I'm really not a scientist, but tonight I am going to make my contribution to the science of the Great Salt Lake. And this is something that, unless you watch my Facebook page, you've probably never seen in your life. I think the only place it exists is on the Great Salt Lake. I spend a lot of time, even in the windstorms. My poor dog has to come with me quite often, but I walk the beaches. And this picture on the top right, you've all heard in Death Valley of the Speedway and the rocks that slide there. And it was a big mystery for a long time figuring out how that happened. Well, this is a big pile of bison dung, and it's huge. It's the size of a small turkey. You can see the bison tracks back here if you look close, and then you can see the track that the bison dung has made, and it actually moved. I've seen this 3 times now. And if you kick that pile of bison dung, it's really hard. It hurts your toe. It's like a solid rock. And I've got my theories on this, how this happens. So this is my hypothesis on it, more or less. Where I find them is where the shore, where the lake is receded and there's a low spot. And quite often in those low spots, during a wind event, the waves will blow up and fill that spot with salt water again. And I think what's happens is the bison dung acts like a string that you put in a cup of salt water, and it sucks up the salt. I think that happens, and it enlarges it, makes it solid, and then a wind event, maybe later on when there's fresh water that's laid on top of the salt water to capture the wind more, moves the bison dung. But I think that's what happens there. So kind of going through and just showing some images of all the different formations that you see. And, you know, I ask myself all the time, what's going on here? What does all of this mean? And I really didn't have an answer for a lot of it, and you know why I was so compelled to go through and explore this stuff. And I hit a point I think that a lot of people hit. A scientist, you know, usually before they really break the frontier of their knowledge in a subject, I think an artist, you know, when they really make that masterpiece, I think a parent or a child that for the first time really commits to loving their parent or their child. I think in many walks in life and an adventure, quite often before they go on a trip, they hit this area that they know something's there, but they don't have the tools, they don't have the mental capability to define it. And you just have to launch yourself into it. And this whole time I was trying to understand, why do I want to circumnavigate the lake? And I finally had to make that step. And I continued to explore the lake, the wetlands around the lake, all the bird stuff. I started to think of the lake as a different world. And this is pretty cheesy, but bear with me here. So these are called mini worlds. And I took a few from around the lake. This is actually the trunk of Elephant Head. This is Elephant Head. This would be Fairy Peak. This is actually 180-degree view. And it's just a thing you can do in Photoshop. This is the ranch down on Antelope Island. I thought a lot of people would recognize that. I included it. This is actually on the east side of Antelope Island, near where the Fairy Peak Trailhead Road goes up. This would be the Wasatch Front back here. And this is on Buffalo Point. This is a gravel pullout just before you get to Buffalo Point, which is up here. This would be Fairy Peak, and this would be going out on Ladyfinger and Egg Island area. And I really, really got to thinking of the lake as a different world, because it was so different. And what I realized is the reason that I needed to make this trip is I needed to help tell the story about the lake. The lake's a very unique place, and its story deserves to be told. So in the process, I started designing lakes or kayaks around the lake because I spent so much time there. And this is an American Avocet for those of you that aren't birders. And my whole Avocet line of boats, my favorite line of boats, is designed around the Avocet. And here I've superimposed the Avocet beak, so you can see I took the line of the beak for the deck line of the boat, and several of the curves in the boat come from different parts of the body of the Avocet. And it's a pretty involved process. You basically take a whole bunch of sticks like this and you put them together and try to make them a beautiful boat like this, and with a lot of clamps and glue in between. And eventually you fiberglass them inside and out to give them the strength and protection, and you've got a beautiful boat. And the 2 boats we took are both from the Avocet design, and actually the one here on the right is in the breeding plumage of the Avocet, and one on the left is in the winter plumage of the Avocet. So So for the birders, kind of neat boats. So we continued to paddle, the lake continued to go down, and we found ways to deal with that. This picture shows the wood that's floated up on the bank from the high point in the 80s when the lake was flooding. And actually, this is several years ago. The water's probably a mile further out than what it shows in this picture right now, but it shows the distance and whatnot. And stromatolites started coming up. I think the first time I really started to see those was about 5 years ago. We had a couple years that were pretty low there, and then we had a year that was pretty high and another low year, and this year it became dramatic. And the lake has always been a place of life and death, and it's pretty stark there. You've got just beautiful life, and you've got incredibly in-your-face death that you see there. And as I looked at what was going on with these stromatolites, I started to wonder if the scales tipped, if it's getting to be more of a place of death than a place of life and death. This picture on there, all these pictures were taken within about 20 feet of each other. The picture on the left is taken in 2018. The picture on the top right was taken in 2020, and the picture on the bottom was taken November 8th of this year, all from the same place. That gives you a perspective of how that lake is changing and how dramatic the change has been. This is what they should look like when they're under the water and healthy. This is what the microbialites look like, and this is what they should look like. Very quickly, a plug, there's some great sources for technical information. We're not going to get into them very much, but one of my favorite is going to the DNR page, Utah Geological Survey, and they've got Great Salt Lake, Lake Bonneville, they've got microbialites, all kinds of information. Here's a chart that really helps you understand microbialites and oolitic sand and some of those things. Other charts that help you understand the different levels of the lake over the thousands of years. This one on the right, actually, it's kind of interesting. This red line is an indication of where the salt is 1 foot deep along the shores of the Great Salt Lake. That's a little bit dated. The shores are out, for the waters receded quite a bit there. Getting into the presentation more and showing you the pictures of what we saw finally. Some things to consider. The Great Salt Lake has incredible economic, environmental, and ecological resources that benefit Utah greatly. And this chart shows some of those. I'm not going to go into the detail, but it's challenged. And a lot of times we think of the challenges as something like global warming, and it's vague, and we're not part of it. The reason the water's low is primarily us. This is a study that Wayne Wartsbaugh did from Utah State back in 2016. He looked at the level of the lake now and what the impact was of the human impact on the lake was, as far as taking water that would have gone to the lake and using it for our purposes. So the lake is 7 feet lower because of agricultural use, by far the biggest use of water on the lake. The mineral extraction and salt ponds takes another 1.4 feet out. The municipal and industrial use is another 1.3 feet. Then pounded wetlands. Our wetlands around the lake are actively managed lands. They're diked and they manage the water to maximize basically the forage for the birds there. Takes 1.1 feet, and then evaporation off of the reservoir is another 0.3. So basically 11 feet of water has been taken out of that lake by our purposes. The lake would be 11 feet deeper now if it wasn't for our use. So we own this. This is something we've done to the lake. It's something that we need to find out ways to turn around. And that's what this trip was really about, was to document this impact that we've had on the lake. Okay, really quickly, and we'll get going. One more chance to win a free book. So the contest here is to name the bird and to name interesting fact about the bird. And we'll give you just a couple minutes to do that. And Jamie will pick the winners with her group, and they'll contact you electronically if you win another one of the books about the Great Salt Lake Monster.
Did you tell people John Neal doesn't count? John Neal can't
Oh,
even be part
I'm
of
glad
this.
you mentioned that. Yeah, yeah. If he's on, I mean, he could tell you the enzymes in that bird's gut and the names of them. So he can't play. He'd win every time. Okay. And Matt, I think you've got the screen now, don't you?
Yeah, I just took over, so hopefully that looks fine.
Yeah, so you can tell them the little statistic of how many of these birds are on the lake, and we'll go forward with the presentation.
Great. So according to Scott's numbers here, about 20,000 breeding adults are on the lake, which is one of the 3 largest colonies in Western North America. So if someone got an answer there, I think I'm going to kind of keep moving on.
Yeah.
So, I kind of got invited. So I think Scott's been paddling the lake for about 30 years, he said. I've got exactly 0 days of paddling experience before jumping on this trip, at least on the Great Salt Lake. I had actually been planning on doing a hike of the John Muir Trail, and that trail was closed due to some wildfires in California. So Scott knew that I had a window of time available and asked me if it was something that I'd want to join in on. And I knew that this would be kind of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity because recreating on the lake is kind of a tricky thing, especially in an overnight capacity. So he had done a lot of the legwork on securing permits and talking with the railroad and making sure that we had access and the ability to pull this trip off, and had spent enough time to gain the experience to pull it off. So really I was the liability, but I think having a partner is definitely a good thing on a trip like this. So we first did a test run going from Antelope Island to Freeman Island, and I think it was kind of for him to see how I would handle some of the challenges that the lake would throw at you, and for me to kind of get to understand what the trip might be a little bit about. So this is a picture of us launching from Antelope Island, and like was alluded to before, we couldn't use the Marina, so we're launching from the shore just kind of north of the Marina. And to kick things off, we found ourselves in knee-deep, shoe-sucking mud as kind of a welcome to the lake. That was kind of my first introduction to getting on the water out there. And it was kind of an eye-opening experience as literally my shoe came off into some pretty stinky smelling mud. But we were able to get on the water and kind of make some smooth sailing from there. And there was some headwind and some crosswind there. And with the crosswinds, every paddle stroke you would take, a few drops of the water would kind of land on my arm. And by the end of the crossing to Freeman Island, my entire sleeve was just crusted in salt, where it had all dried and evaporated. But yeah, relatively smooth sailing until about like a mile in, and then we started finding exposed microbialites about a mile from shore, like I said. And to me, that was really eye-opening. I had no expectation to find and to realize how shallow the water was here, and how these were able to protrude, when it seemed like we were so far from dry land. So that was kind of an interesting experience for me for the first time. So these are some microbialites sticking up from the surface there. But then when we landed on Freeman Island, honestly, like it was a truly fascinating experience. So this is us as we're looking around for brine flies and brine shrimp in the water. And it was just kind of the first exposure to life that is on the lake for me. So I'm kind of learning all of this as I go. I'm kind of new to the area and wanted to use this trip to get to know the Great Salt Lake better. I feel like living in the presence of it, I wanted to try and understand what's going on in my backyard. So yeah, I just wanted to learn what I could from Scott. And so, as we're looking through or walking around Freeman Island, he's kind of pointing different things out. And, you can see a couple different types of biology and life going on the lake, or at least on the islands. So, there was looks like some kind of wasp or bug nest on the bottom side of a boulder here, caterpillars. And then there's a gopher snake in the bottom right-hand corner. Which is like a native species to the island. And as we kept going, we found, just some really beautiful patterns in the sand made from the husks of the shrimp and the different types of sand. The center frame there is actually tracks from a wild boar, and that's not an animal that's native to the island, but apparently the island was once leased to create an exotic hunting preserve, and those could be residual tracks or maybe left from an animal that I think they've all been exterminated, but the evidence of tracks might suggest otherwise. And there's the outfitter cabin from the hunting preserve, and a lot of the island was overgrazed in the 1800s, which allowed cheatgrass to grow, which is another invasive species, and to the island. And now it's kind of everywhere. And then we saw the tracks of one more invasive species, which would be the tracks from the diesel-powered machines that were driving around on the mud flats out there. And it looks like something had gotten stuck there, but was all kind of telling the story and the history of the island. And that was something really interesting for me to see, was not only the biology that's out there that was kind of all new to me, but just the history that's been kind of wrapped around this area. And like I said, I'm kind of learning it all. So if somebody, if you hear something that's not quite right, feel free to chime in with the chat and kind of correct me on this. But as we were discovering, I think I just adjusted my thing. Some different ruins out on Freeman Island. Scott was telling me some stories from the history of it, and I think one of the ones that stuck with me was there's a grave digger that had been digging up bodies and stealing their clothes and their jewelry from them. His name was Jean Baptiste, and when he got caught, he actually got banished to Freeman Island. And after a few weeks of him being out there, the authorities went out to check on him and found that all the wood in the little shack that was out there had been stripped down, and they suspect that he made a raft and tried to make it to shore. Presumably back in the 1800s, the water was quite a bit deeper. I feel like you could have walked ashore when we paddled it. Well, you could have walked ashore from Freeman Island. But back then, I think it was kind of more of a serious crossing for him. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then another story is when we were out there was from a couple. Uriah Werner was the judge of Salt Lake County, and he was kind of facing some pressure from some of the locals. Apparently they had some divergent views, and when he was diagnosed with tuberculosis, the doctor advised him to find a more remote location to kind of help him recover or to live out his life. And he liked Freeman Island, so him and his wife wanted to go live on Freeman Island. But currently the property was being used by the Miller family as they were grazing their sheep on the island. So he kind of tricked the Millers by telling them that he had made a deal with the railroad company to buy the southern tip of the island so that he could build his homestead there. And the southern tip is where the freshwater springs are. And the Millers were really, really furious with this because now they couldn't graze their sheep as they had no access to the fresh water. So they contested the purchase and went to the railroads and had to relocate their flock for fear of losing them. And it turns out that by the time the railroads answered their requests for more information, they said that that they had no claim to buy the southern end of the island. But by that point, it was already too late, and the Wenners were able to continue living out there where they died. And this is a marking of their grave as they were buried on the island. So I just thought that was kind of like an interesting little tidbit. And then currently, the island is still used for, there's an active airstrip out there. And when we were hiking out there, we actually got to see a couple of planes take off, land a couple of times as they circled around. We kind of ended the day with a hike up to the high point of Freeman Island, where we found a cross that had been carved by Kit Carson in 1843. And this was kind of an interesting expedition. It was part of the Fremont expedition of the island. And, they had been dreaming of finding all of these exotic plants and animals that they might find on the island. And on the day of the expedition, they ran into a windstorm halfway across the crossing, and their raft started leaking. And when they arrived on the island, they found it rather inhospitable. There was very little fresh water to be found. There was no game for them to hunt. So they spent the day kind of exploring and documenting the island. They went up to the high point and tried to map out what they could from there. And Kit Carson carved his cross there. He was a recently converted Catholic, I believe. And it was just kind of, it might come as a surprise to some people that, the Catholics were here before the Mormons were, because it was only about 4 years later that Brigham Young and the Mormons came to settle the shores. But they were so disappointed on their initial discovery that there was nothing of note, according to them, on the island, that they named it Disappointment Island. And maybe ironically, for Fremont, it later got named after him. I thought that was kind of fun. And this is the top picture here shows a panorama that what you can see from the top of the island. And it's really looking at what we were attempting to paddle. So from the left, I know it's probably hard to see on your screens and maybe a little small, but from the left all the way Antelope Island, through Stansbury Island, Carrington Island, and then up to Gunnison Island at the far right, and Promontory Point sticking out here. So from that perspective, it looked like quite an undertaking, to be honest. I was a little bit, nervous and going, holy cow, that looks like a long ways to go. The other thing we could see from up here was the Bear River tributary, or at least where the Bear River would be coming into the Great Salt Lake, but it seems like it's quite dry at this point. I just thought that was kind of an interesting a thing to see now as the water levels have dropped to that point. As we kind of we're making our way out, walking on the shores, had the opportunity to kind of take off our shoes and walk barefoot in the sand and kind of get to feel the different types of sand and the different surfaces and the crust and the salts and stuff. It was kind of this adventurous trip, and we kind of had to push our way through some Phragmites, which are another invasive species on the island. There might be some symbolism here, and where I'm like in way over my head, but still kind of smiling through this trip, because that's kind of how I felt, where it's like I still don't really know what I'm getting myself into, but this test run out onto the island on Freeman Island was really quite fun, and I learned a lot from it. So I was really excited to kind of get to do more and get to learn more about the lake. So this is us paddling back from Freeman Island, and the water was just pristine, as it can be quite often on the lake. And I have to say that just, kind of paddling these beautiful kayaks through this glassy water was just an incredible feeling. And I think I was hooked. Like, I wanted to learn more about the wildlife, the history, and the biology and geology of the area. So I, told Scott that I was kind of on board and ready to start helping and looking forward to it. So he kind of sends me a packing list, and we sit down and we start planning our route and trying to wrap our heads around what this undertaking is going to look like. So on the left, we had actually gotten a collage of, and these are satellite images taken just 1 week prior to our departure date. So we thought that this would be the most up-to-date information on where the water level was, how we could expect a route plan, because what we learned was a lot of the bathymetric maps, or the maps of the lake, would be quite difficult to follow because of the low water levels. So we needed to know, where is it passable, where is it not, what point do we aim for, and how to set our compass bearings for those things. Because something I learned out on the water is you really can only see a couple miles ahead of you. And a lot of times we were making, 5 to 15 mile crossings. So the target we were aiming for was well out of sight due to the curvature of the earth. And you can see here all of these lighter colored surfaces. This is all exposed shoreline and salt and sand, right? So our plan was we thought that we would want to head clockwise, starting from the South Marina. So starting here, do a clockwise along the shore. And we wanted to do that because we were really concerned about the northern arm, both in terms of weather. It seems like quite an inhospitable place. And we kind of wanted to get up there as quickly as we could and kind of get through this while we still had accurate weather forecasts, so that we didn't have the opportunity for a storm to blow in on us unexpectedly. And we thought that it could take us anywhere from 6 to 10 days, or 6 to 12 days actually. And we're kind of, planning for that. So we packed up our bags. This is kind of the pile of gear that we had, Scott's on the left, mine on the right. And, the thought of every journey begins with the first step and a big pile of stuff, or in this case, maybe a first paddle and 2 big piles of stuff. And I was just, coming from the mindset of backpacking, I was trying to go ultra light and stuff. And on this trip, I thought it was quite luxurious, being able to, not have to cut my toothbrush in half and could pack fresh vegetables and changes of clothes. One challenge was we had to pack all of our fresh water, as there's no drinking sources on the lake. So we started off with like 18 liters of water each. And Scott had done some planning ahead of time to stash water on the causeway in a couple different spots. But really, we were going out there with the expectation of we might be out here for 12 days. So we needed to be supplied to do that, which was quite an undertaking. So those cabins in the cockpit and everything was just stuffed full with gear. And here we are kind of setting out. And I always was a little bit hesitant to push this beautiful boat out into, I'm afraid of hitting rocks and stuff. And I kind of voiced that concern to Scott, and he re-quoted the ship is safe in harbor, but that's not what ships are built for kind of quote back at me, which was kind of reassuring, but still a little trepidation there. And our first day, we were coming from the South Marina, and we were aiming for this spit here. And you can see here's a bathymetric map that shows the spit being underwater. And it was quite exposed, and that was going to be our first crossing. So that's about 5 miles to here. And, we always wanted to be able to stop every now and then and get out and stretch your legs. It's kind of a commodity when kayaking, to get off your butt and move around a little bit, and just to work some different muscles. So we were going to come across here and then continue up towards the north point of Stansbury Island is our plan. And here we are starting out, doing what we had seen from the exploration trips, we kind of just had to pick a bearing and keep going because we couldn't really see the spit until we were pretty close to it. I was afraid that this trip would be full of these mind-numbing, monotonous experiences. So I downloaded a bunch of audiobooks and podcasts to kind of put in the headphones, tune out, and just kind of cruise. And honestly, I didn't put them in once. I didn't listen to anything when I was going. It was pretty captivating. Every day kind of brought new experiences. On this crossing, we kind of came across these huge waves of dead brine shrimp that were just floating through. So you'd see these red waves that captivated attention and everything. It was really cool to come through those. And this is coming up to the spit. So there were not a ton of birds on the lake. I think it was a little bit after a lot of their migratory periods. But we have some sanderlings here, and we did see some avocet and some phalarope, and a lot of gulls as we paddled, and they kind of kept things entertaining and something to watch as we went along. And here we are standing on early spit, and this is all oolitic sand. So as we go to stretch our legs, we're walking around, and if there's any sort of incline that you would step on, this oolitic sand would act like little ball bearings underneath your foot, and you would just slide as you walked. And it actually was like quite tricky to walk, kind of getting your land legs back on, as well as walking on this kind of unusual surface. You can see some four-wheeler tracks here. Apparently that's a semi-common thing to do on the west shores. And we actually did see some people out four-wheeling. And just kind of pointing out some things that we had learned from the Freeman paddling trial run was I definitely had this waterproof spray jacket on. That was a lifesaver, kind of kept all the splash off me, as well as a spray skirt that we would interface around the edge of the cockpit here to keep water out of the boat, and to keep those kind of waves from getting your seat all wet and everything. But those only work if they're actually like on the cockpit. So as we walked away, we had some waves come splashing up over our boats and just dumped like millions of these dead shrimp that were just like stinking and gross, all into Scott's boat. And this is his baseball hat here that just got like covered in the first couple hours of the trip. So it was like another good welcome to the lake of, and we were just laughing over this because that's all you can do in a situation like that. But, all right, embrace it because we're going to be stinky for the next few days. So that's how it's going to go. And as we kept paddling up, this was really the first major expanse of microbialites that we came to. So there's the talk next week, which is going to go way more in depth about microbialites than I planned to. But I think I heard Jamie one time describe them as coral's ugly stepsister or something like that, which I think is hilarious and pretty accurate. So essentially, they're these calcium carbonate structures that are kind of these living organisms with algae and bacteria but also kind of these inorganic substances, these living rocks, and they're like one of the earliest life forms on Earth. And I thought that was pretty cool. And historically, they've covered about like 20% of the bottom of the lake bed, but they need to be within a certain band of water depth in order to get enough sunlight to survive. And as the water levels are receding, more of these microbialites are becoming exposed to the air. So that's kind of what we had run into here was, these fields of exposed microbialites. And they really act as like the foundation of the food chain in the lake. So they provide a lot of the requirements for the brine fly and to some degree the brine shrimp, which provides a lot of nourishment to migratory birds. So about 10 million birds come through the Great Salt Lake annually on migratory paths, and a lot of them feed off of these brine fly and brine shrimp. So this is kind of the foundation, right? And as we talked about, they're kind of under threat as the water recedes. So we found these all the way from the Spit, all the way through Stansbury Island, and we were kind of having to navigate around them. And that was something that really didn't show up on our satellite imagery. We could see the shoreline of the salt and the sand, but we couldn't see these dark structures that were protruding from the water here. So we kind of ran into them as a surprise. And as a result, we had to paddle quite a few miles away from the shore just in order to be in water deep enough that we could paddle efficiently. And sometimes we would run into these reefs or a band of microbialites that we couldn't get around. It looked like it would go on forever. So we had to try and navigate our way through them. And sometimes the water is, ankle deep, as it were. And at this point, we're a mile or two away from the, what I'd call dry land of the shoreline. So sometimes we kind of had to adapt plans and change as we went through. Here's a different structure of them in some shallower waters. And something that I learned pretty quickly on this trip was that paddling efficiency drops dramatically in shallow water. So you need about 3 feet of water. Otherwise, the water your boat's displacing has nowhere to go, and it just creates a lot of drag. So it really slows progress. So, while it was more interesting to look through clear water and be able to see the bottom, it really made the paddling just exhausting at times. So we were always kind of trying to balance this game of how do we be close enough to shore that we can go in without having to make a big sacrifice of mileage, but be far enough out that we could paddle efficiently. And, sometimes that led us, quite a ways from shore. So this is just heading up towards the north end of Stansbury Island. And when we could go into shore, we'd often end up kind of having to squat on the exposed beds of microbialites because we were still miles from this dry land. And I thought that was, just kind of this unexpected challenge for us was just the challenge of finding a spot that we could pull in. And, thinking about in terms of camping, we kind of had to be strategic about finding deeper waters and where that would interface with shore so that we could potentially paddle all the way into a suitable place to set up our tent. So just a couple more pictures of microbialites. And this is a foam that had been kicked up from the day before. Kind of in between them. I think these are some interesting pictures of just the exposed beds and the vastness of them. I really love this photo. I don't really remember exactly what I was thinking at the time. I like to pretend or like to imagine that it's something, philosophical, something like that the lake is changing, and what we know about those changes can be kind of alarming. But, there's a lot of stuff that we still don't know about the changes that are happening with the lake, things like potential for dust storms or exposure of new toxic substances or impact on, various economies and stuff. And we're kind of trying to do our best to wrap our heads around that. So, I like to think it was something philosophical, but I'm pretty sure I was also just thinking like, how the hell are we going to get around this huge field of microbialites right now? Like, crap, that's a long way to go out of our way. And here we are. Here we are. Looking east towards Antelope Island. And we had some headwinds on this day, so we made a lot slower progress than we expected. I think the texture of the water in this picture really comes through, and I think Jamie mentioned it before, that just like the heaviness of the water, I think makes it look a little bit different than what I was used to with fresh water. Apparently it takes more wind to make the saltwater whitecap because of its heavier. And I think you get a lot of this like really interesting textures on the water. So I just kind of wanted to point that out as we kind of go through some of these pictures. That just fascinated me as we went. But finally, the winds kind of died down and we had calm water. And then again, with this heavy water, it seems like when it's calm, it is glassy. And it's just this incredible experience to be out there at sunrise and at sunset as you get these reflections and the mirror-like surfaces was just fantastic to be able to experience. So this is us pulling into shore at the end of our long first day. We did about 26 miles, which was, by far the furthest I'd ever kayaked in a day. And we had set up camp. It wasn't quite as far as we had hoped, but we were optimistic that we were still on pretty good pace. And this first evening, totally exhausted, to be honest, but really felt satisfied, here eating some warm food, looking out over these beautiful pastel colors on a mirror-like surface. It was really hard to complain about anything at that point. And because we were kind of feeling behind schedule, we decided that we were going to start putting in long days. We were getting up before sunrise and kind of getting our camps torn down, and we wanted to get on the water pretty much right as the sun was rising. So this is us kind of packing up the boats by headlamp. And you can see there's a lot of foam that had washed in over the night. And that's because there's these like surfactants in the water that allow foam to build when the water whitecaps, and it allows the bubbles to stay like you would find with soap. And I just thought that was so much fun and so interesting. And, the lake kind of kept providing these little surprises to me that I thought were just really inspiring to keep going, kept the trip lighthearted. It was a lot of fun. So, here I am like playing with it, like fallen leaves kind of thing, like throwing it up because we had some strong winds, chucking it into the air and watching it flutter down the beach and stuff. It was a really cool time. And you can see some kind of moody skies as we got onto the water. This was really the strongest winds and the roughest, choppiest water that we got into. And that kind of was the foreshadowing for that. So you can see a little bit more choppy water paddling out into some waves. And a lot of that can be attributed to the different temperature gradients that you get as the sun rises and heats the land at a different rate than it heats the water. That creates a lot of different air currents. And this one was, I think we decided it was generated coming out of the Weber Canyon. And it really generated the strong crosswind that we had to paddle through. And it doesn't look like much here. But I think, Scott had to put his camera away as we were getting into some of the more serious water for fear of, he had to kind of keep hands on paddles and didn't want to get saltwater sprayed up on his camera, because this wind was really spraying up a lot of water as we went. And it to me, like, they felt like 4-foot waves. They were huge. And, talking to Scott afterwards, he was kind of like, yeah, those might have been like 2.5 feet. But it was a little bit intimidating as we headed straight into them, that he kind of let me go first. And I think he was being quite strategic about that to kind of scoop me up in case something happened, that he was strategically placed behind me, downwind from me. But, at the time I felt like I was kind of alone out there charging into these headwinds. And, every now and then waves would break right on top of you and come kind of crashing over. And thankfully, we had our spray jackets and spray skirts on, but we were just starting to get really, splashed and everything. It was quite intense. And here, I think you can kind of see some of the salt building up on my jacket, and my whole side of my face was just covered in salt crystals and stuff. And half my jacket was salty and the other half wasn't, which was kind of interesting. And where we were heading now was north towards Hat Island. And you can see here that there's this major fault line shown under the surface of the water here. And it creates high spots with less fine sediment, which promotes for the growth of microbialites. And this is another interesting kind of form that we saw the microbialites take, which was, instead of these rounded humps that we could see above or below the surface of the water, we saw large, expansive mats of them that were kind of these continuous structures of them. And this was only about 1 to 2 feet below the surface. And the other interesting thing was the reddish hue that they cast in this area. And this was kind of all along the north point by Hat Island there. And it looks like that the red color seems to be coming from this outer slimy layer here. And I think you can see a couple like larvae in the picture there. But just, you know, some kind of interesting observations, and maybe one of the people who study the lake can kind of chirp in as you know, what might have caused the different structures there. But to me, it was interesting to note the differences as we went. But the thing that struck me here was the vastness of the microbialite structures, and how shallow of water that they were in. So, you know, a couple more feet of drop would be pretty significant in exposing that much of the structures. So this is about a mile or two from Hat Island. And you can just see that, you know, this is where we had to stop to take lunch because there was no way to get through these fields of microbialites. So just kind of thankful for any opportunity to get out and stretch the legs and get some food in their stomachs. So, all right, so I'm going to hand it over to Scott, but we've got another opportunity to get a book. So if somebody can chirp in with this bird and maybe a fun fact on it, I think we'll use that as a transition.
And I'm going to pipe in too and say that Jan Hansen, she was the very first person to respond about the pelican. But I really liked Andrea Bricky because Andrea talked about the pelican. Her fun fact was that pelicans incubate their eggs with their webbed feet, and they do. It's the cutest thing ever that you can see, you know, in these pictures, that the pelicans put their large webbed feet over these eggs to protect them and to incubate them. So I both want a book. So we'll be watching for more on these birds now while we switch to Scott. I see a lot of eared grebes, but I want fun facts. I mean, honestly, like, eared grebes are one of my favorite birds. And so this is going to be really hard.
Okay, well, we'll talk about the eared grebes just briefly. This is a bird that was on the water when we were there. In fact, it's pretty interesting. When you're on the water, you're always watching for shifts in the wind, changes in clouds, any indicator of wind, and you're watching the water surface really, really carefully. And when we came back south, coming over the Causeway, and I think we were along the side of Fremont Island, Matt looked off to the west and he said, "We've got rough water coming in." And I said, "No, you've got 4 million grebe out there." and these were the eared grebe that were staging on the lake, that will stage on the lake, and essentially double their weight when they're out there, eating about 30,000 brine shrimp a day. And they will, sometime between Thanksgiving and about New Year's Day, and groups, they'll fly in groups large enough to be picked up on Doppler radar. They'll fly off and fly south for their trip south for the winter. But yeah, I'm interested to see there's a lot of neat facts about them, and I'll stop there and we'll see what kind of facts come in. So we were at a decision point at this time in the paddle. This was actually an image taken by NASA about a week after our trip. And this would be Stansbury Island right here. That's Badger Island. This is Carrington Island, and Hat Island really doesn't show up. It's right there. And we were probably off here somewhere. And you know, it's getting late in the day. We haven't made the miles we wanted to because of the wind. And the wind's been pretty significant. And that Weaver Canyon wind's kind of an every morning wind, and it can be very significant. It blows through here. And it was starting to calm down. So we're at this point, and a 1 mile crossing for sea kayakers, something you take real seriously. It's a long time to be exposed on the water. We were about 14 or 15 miles from the Causeway if we went straight north, which was the next dry land. Our other option would be drop down into this bay on the backside of Carrington Island, which, by the way, was used as a bombing island during the war, for test bombing. And down here is where Magnesium, US Magnesium, I almost said MagCorp, their old name, is located. So a very industrial area. And they kind of control property up to about this little point here, which is another, like Erdley Spit before, it's another fault line. And Hill Air Force Base controls this whole shoreline right here. It's part of the Utah Test and Training Area. So you can't land there. In fact, they control out into the water there. So we had one option, which was to paddle about 14, 15 miles down here and camp in the one little tiny place we could camp, and then be further away from the Causeway in the morning when the Weaver winds are stronger, or just take our shot at the wind calming down and going across to the railroad. And our initial plan was to actually make it quite a bit further north than that to camp. Fortunately, we had worked with the railroad and talked with them, arranged to be able to leave water stashes, and where the old causeway and the new causeway meet, there's a protected area there that's used quite often by sailboats when the sailboats could get on the water, brine shrimpers, and we knew we might need that to camp, and we talked with them and got approval to be able to camp there if we had to. So that became our plan. We decided to go for a 14, 15-mile paddle, which is a long time without being able to get out and stretch. And we went across towards the causeway, and the water did calm down. This was the calmest water we had actually had that day, and it just got better and better as we went. So we were able to make the time pretty quickly, actually. And we got to the causeway right about sunset. And the causeway is significant. So when the railroad was initially put in 1869, it went up around the north end of the lake. And that added a lot of time for the trains. And they were interested in being able to reduce that amount of time. And Lucin cutoff was the answer to that. And it was a cutoff that basically goes from Lucin on the west side of the lake to Ogden on the east side of the lake, across the lake. And a portion of that was earth-filled causeway, and a portion of it was actually one of the greater engineering feats of its day. And it was a trestle that was built. And the trestle allowed the water to continue to mix in the Great Salt Lake. But the trestle, although it was a great engineering accomplishment, it wasn't too good. It required a lot of maintenance. The train still had to slow down on it. So in the late 50s, they decided, well, they constructed another causeway. They used the existing causeway, and then where it became a trestle, they built another causeway to the side of it, made an earth-fill causeway completely across the north arm of the lake. And that cut the lake in a section similar to the causeway that goes to Antelope Island. And the north arm has no inlets, so it became very salty. Had about 30% of the microbialites in the lake on the north end, and they all died because of the high salinity within probably 4 or 5 years of the earth-filled causeway being put in. And they have at times had breaches. Some of the early ones, actually, the causeway continues to sink, and they sunk down and were filled with rock. But more recently, they've put in another breach, and it's very close to where the old causeway and the new causeway meet, and very close to where we camped. So we made it to that point that night, which is right here on the map, and camped in a whole bunch of rubble from the causeway. It was maybe the second more luxurious campsite we had on the entire trip, actually. And the next day was a special day. So we launched from the south side of the causeway and had to go through the breach in the causeway. And things got interesting. There was a wind, and it was a little bit windy coming in from the south. And as I was approaching the breach, I grounded on something 20 feet out from the breach. And this is a fairly deep section of the lake. And I told Matt to try 10 feet further over, and he did that, and he grounded too. And we got over the top of it. And what it is it's the rock that was put there when they were building the breach. They had to dam off both sides of it. And on the south side, they've left a big portion of that. So if they ever need to fill it in, they can do it again. And we paddled under the bridge and the breach, and it was just totally calm and almost quiet. There was wind on both sides, and there were huge waves coming crashing in from the north. There was a wind from the north blowing north, and the higher elevation of the lake on the south, with water running south, and where the two collided, there were huge waves. And I was a little bit fearful because we didn't know if there was another rock wall we were going to run into there, and if there was a rock wall, and if we got high centered on it, our kayaks would have got turned sideways and we would have got dumped over in the waves. And it was still dark. It was really dark still. It was kind of concerning. So I just told Matt, I'm just going to go for it. If it works, follow me. And if it doesn't, use your imagination. And we went for it, and I got through and he got through, and we paddled into this magical kingdom still in the dark. In fact, this is probably 20, 30 minutes after we got through, and the wind died down, and the water looked kind of purplish as light started to increase for the day. And we could see these rafts of ice crystals all around us, and a lot of foam floating. There's quite often foam in the north end. It's so windy up there. There's foam on the water quite often. You can paddle for miles through foam. And we just knew we were in a different world, as different as the South Arm had been. The North Arm was just incredibly different. And it just got more and more surreal as the light picked up. This would be Strong's Knob for those that are familiar with the lake going north. And just looking at the vastness, you know, we finally made it to Causeway, and all of a sudden, you know, we don't even know where that North Shore is up there, which is kind of the next destination, and just an incredible vastness on the lake. And we made our way over to Gunnison Island, and Gunnison Island's significant. The first bird we showed was the pelican, and this is where the rookery for the pelican are. There used to be a lot more nests there than there are right now. There used to be probably about 40–50% more nesting birds than there are now, but there's still a significant number of nesting birds, as those numbers that Matt read off indicated, although those were the highs. It's lower than that now. And there's a lot of history on this island also. Stansbury built one of his triangulation stations up on a high point here. I think my favorite history on this island is the history of Alfred Lamborn. He was an artist. His family was a convert to the LDS Church, like many people that came to Utah, came here as a young boy, and was kind of a self-taught romantic realist landscape artist. And he just really captured the feel of the lake well in his artwork. There's a great program last week. I wish I could have got down to it in Salt Lake, Costa there, but he actually tried to homestead on the island, and he built a shack there and was going to start a little vineyard there when he was there. And it was an interesting time in his life. Like many artists, he pushed himself really hard, and he kept a journal, and he wrote a book. It's called Our Inland Sea, The Story of a Homestead. And it's interesting to read the book because he vacillated between this just absolute reality and complete insanity the whole time he was out there, just trying to figure out life. And it gives you really good insight into an artist's life and in this remote location. During the same era, iguana hunters came out trying to mine the iguana. That didn't work, neither did the homestead. But a lot of history on that island. We would have liked to have visited that. It was after migration season, so we wouldn't have disrupted the pelican, but unfortunately, when the laws were written that established that as a wildlife reserve, there was no latitude given to allow people to go out there unless they're escorted by the Department of Natural Resources. None of them were interested in making the kayak trip with us. But we came into this just surreal environment with this strawberry lemonade color water that, you know, just changed colors because of the reflection, the bright salt underneath, and the salt just caking the floor and the salt coming up. These would all be old microbialites, and their salt crust. They've been dead, like I say, since probably the early 60s at this point. But just this otherworldly experience, it was just amazing. It was like looking at life through rose-colored glasses. And the salt's halide. It's sodium chloride. It's essentially table salt. It's got a little bit of magnesium and potassium in it, but it's essentially table salt that we were in. And we just took pictures all over. This is actually the Cub Islands just to the north of Gunnison Island, and just we were amazed at the crystals and everything we were seeing. And we paddled by this forever. Just an incredible sight, looking at the island and seeing everything that was there. So, and again, this is where the pelican, if we wouldn't be, well, we were about 2 miles away. This is taken with the telephoto lens, but you wouldn't be there during the nesting season, but at least 3,000 to 4,000 nests are there, maybe 5,000. At the height, they had about 10,000 nests on that island at one time. So incredible area. And again, foam everywhere. The windstorms are very common on the north end. It's ironic. We were planning for the worst wind and the most likely full day or 2-day delays because of wind and weather on the north end. And we had calm water. It didn't happen, but it's really well known for the strong winds. So we continued heading north. This is Dolphin Island, the shoreline's right about here now, actually, and we were paddling kind of in this vicinity to be in deep enough water. And we spotted something out in the water, and it was white, and we didn't know if it was 100 yards away or 3 miles away, but it was in the middle of the lake. And you know, we were kind of curious, but kind of tired too. Our kayaks were just getting slower, and we didn't know if we were fatigued or what was going on. And we looked out there, and one of the scientists that work on the lake a lot, that's been a great resource for me over the years, you know, I ask, you know, if you're along the shore, watch for any dead pelican and see if they have bands and collect them. Really curious to see what the nesting success was for the year. And I thought, you know, that might be a dead pelican. So we go paddling out to it. And this is maybe 4 or 5 miles out into the lake. And we get out to it, and it's just this rock dome poking way up in the water. The water's only about 2 feet deep here. The bathymetric maps do not show that. And so, yeah, it wasn't a dead pelican, and it didn't have a tag on it, but it was still just this amazing thing. And that's something the lake just gives you all the time when you're out on that water, just unexpected, amazing experiences. So we paddled a long ways back in and really didn't try to get to shore. We stopped in an area like this and just enjoyed the scenery, and lunch was served surrounded by raspberry lemonade. And that you know, that was our life. Actually not a bad lunch. Like Matt said, when you kayak, you can eat a little bit better than when you're backpacking, but a very different environment. Best restaurant in Utah right there. And then we headed north again, and for the first time we could start to see in the far distance the North Shore, and took a few more breaks in places like this. Ran into this little guy, and you know, the lake, unless you're an extremophile or a halophile or a halophyte, you don't want to be there. And this little guy was finding that out, and so were Matt and I. You know, the experience was just incredible, but it's a tough environment to be in. One challenge we had is the reflection of the clouds made pretty much the same color on the water as the salt domes coming up from the bottom. And we have to dodge the salt domes as we go by them. The clouds we don't have to dodge, but the good news is the cloud reflection moves with you, the salt dome doesn't. So you just really had to pay attention. And if that white spot wasn't moving, you had to dodge quickly to keep from getting grounded on it and tearing your boat up on the salt crystals. We eventually got north of Dolphin Island, and for the night, our plan was to go down here. This is another fault line. This is the shoreline's maybe 2.5 miles from here right now, and it's about 3 feet deep right there. And it's again a place of sharp drop off. And I paddled by there before, and I knew we could get in there and camp. So we started cutting across from about here, trying to get to there. And again, we were moving slow, and we're running out of salt sunlight. And this was a secondary camp I'd planned on, a good place to pull into. And so we decided to hit that. That was closer. And so we started making our way to that. And this is looking north across the lake. This is looking south from almost the same spot. Just the incredible vastness. This would be Antelope Island here at the South Shore, and the Ochres are way down here in the smog. And we pulled into this just otherworldly place. And both of us hesitated. Matt looked at it for a little while, got his camera out. I took a drink of water. And, you know, for the first time, we're thinking in our minds, how do you camp in salt? Neither of us had set up a tent in salt before. We'd never experienced this. And we just kind of looked at it and pondered about it for a while. We didn't have a lot of time because the sun was setting, and we got out and just started exploring this incredible place and all the different forms and formations that you see in it. And we were happy that we did pick a place that was fairly level that we were able to get out on. We had to pull the boats up quite a ways. The storms can really come up on the shore a long ways because they're very gradual shores. And we had plastic screw anchors that in many places we screw into the ground and anchor the boats down with too, so we wouldn't lose them at night. But we set up our tents and just kind of enjoyed a little bit of brief time. It was getting cold. It was late in the year, so changed in warmer clothing, let our feet dry. Your feet are wet the whole day when you're kayaking, and and enjoyed the sunset, and actually made dinner pretty late in the evening. And then Matt climbed into bed, and I climbed into bed for a while, but I had to get out and enjoy the night, and just walked out and got pictures of the Milky Way. That would be Jupiter right there, and Saturn is right here. And just enjoyed seeing the night. I felt like I was on the moon. It was just an incredible view that we had there. And at this point, this is our next bird to guess the name and give us some interesting facts on, and I'll turn the screen over to Matt.
And I'll just say we had a lot of really awesome fun facts about eared grebes. My favorite one though, and I know that I'm a little bit biased, was Emily. Emily Calhoun is a student of ours. And she commented, what are they now? I lost it. Like the group of eared grebes is called I lost it. I'm sorry. What's a group of eared grebes called? A water dance. A water dance.
A water dance?
Yeah. So Emily, you got it. Now tell us what these are, and we'll keep going.
Cool. Yeah, we'll keep moving through this. I think Scott's given you some hints earlier in the presentation. Shouldn't be too tough. So some fun facts would be great. Yeah, so I think I said that my favorite part of the trip was, the sunrises in the mornings. And I think that was just, tenfold in the North Arm. Really, it felt like, I think Scott mentioned, it felt like another world. And I think he even made the mistake of calling it ice instead of salt crystals or ice crystals. And it was almost hard to comprehend that it was salt. And I think we both kind of kept making that mistake of calling it ice because that was what we had experience with. And it's just kind of the slip of the tongue. But yeah, just incredible lighting and you can see salt crystals floating on the surface here as we paddle through. So the plan for today was to continue along the shore here past Spiral Jetty and try and get as close to the causeway as we could because on this side of the causeway, there is no way to paddle underneath of it. So we knew we were going to have to unload our boats and carry them over top of the causeway, which we had no idea how long that was really going to take. It seemed like a really formidable challenge to us. And we were feeling quite tired. So we were like, okay, let's just try and make it as close to that causeway as we can. And we kind of took every opportunity to pull over to shore and take breaks because I think Scott mentioned earlier, we were just kind of feeling quite sluggish at this point. I don't know if it was like the heavier water at the time, but this was right around the 100-mile mark that we kind of jumped out of our boats and took our selfie for the photo or for the trip. But still kind of finding like really interesting moonscapes as we went on the shores. And just the salt was really starting to accumulate on the boats, and you can start to see it here. And everything just was after a couple of days of being in the North Arm, everything was getting clogged with salt. So we had salt in our zippers and our ropes, and Velcro stopped working, and knots were impossible to get undone, and all of these mechanisms stopped working. So we'd have to whack each other's rudder to like get it to fall down because releasing it with the ropes didn't work anymore. So it was really starting to wear on us and wear on the boats. And despite being incredibly beautiful, it was a harsh environment to operate in. And as we were paddling along, we saw a ton of brine shrimp up near the north end, near Spiral Jetty, and a lot of the eggs were floating along in the foam. And again, kind of jumping out. This was near Spiral Jetty. We were both starting to really feel the miles adding up. And I think we both kind of felt that mentally as well, right? And it kind of came at a good time, but we looked down and were able to see floating on the surface these crystals that had formed these perfect structures here. And if you gently scoop down and picked them out of the water, you could see there were these incredible little pyramids that had formed in the salt that were just floating on the surface. And I think that kind of gave us both this little morale boost because it was just so incredible. And we had to kind of remember that what we were doing was, we were both very happy to be there, even though, our shoulders and our backs were starting to hurt. That, a magical experience like this is something that neither of us would have traded for the world. So it was well needed. So I'm going to hand it back over to Scott.
Yeah, this is a pretty easy one, and I will get my screen going here and catch back up to where we are when everybody gives their guess for where they're at. Okay, so these are the California gull. About 120,000 breeding adults here. It's the largest breeding population in the world. The highest count's been 275,000 California gull. So this is going on our trip. This is Mount Tarpey. If any of you are familiar with the Chief Sagwitch story, this is where he became a chief. This was the wintering ground that he primarily would stay at and where he became significant in the tribe. This is Matt feeling an awful lot like a potato chip at this point. And and again, you know, we get off, we explore. It was kind of interesting. We saw these brine fly up there, not what we expected. There was a freshwater spring that ran into the salt not too far away. That may have been the source, salt crystals, and just this unbelievable. This is just north of Indian Cove is where we're at here. Unbelievable experience. I love to take pictures of people in the landscape that are impromptu. It's really hard to do that with Matt because he's always crawling under things and checking things out. He actually broke through the surface right here, made a big hole down through there, and there's just a whole bunch of loose salt crystals underneath here. Here you can see stacked the slabs of from where he broke through, and just amazing sights. This might look like Matt was relaxing. Actually, it was kind of an excruciating pain because of his back. 30 miles a day in a kayak's pretty hard if you're not used to kayaking, and his back was telling him that that was pretty hard. He'll probably choose a bike trip for our next adventure, and I'll have a similar pain, a little bit lower, I'm afraid. But this is looking over towards the Indian Cove area, and this is looking south towards the railroad. Just incredible formations everywhere, and you just get a million questions. You can see these flakes down here. That's natural cement that forms on the rocks, and it's came off here. You can see some of it still on the rock, you know, and you just get a lot of questions. You know, did that form 3,000 years ago, or did it form after the causeway went in? Was it on top of or below the living part of these structures back when they were alive? Now they were all washed like leaves into low spots. And here's some extremely eroded out microbialites. In fact, this right here is the picture that I just showed you. So just amazing place to stop on shore and to see things. And we're at our next bird again.
What are they? I have a couple winners from the last one, but I'm going to save them to the end. So go, Matt.
Okay.
All right, unmuted now. Cool. So I kind of mentioned that we had been, feeling pretty worn down, and we, noticed that the salt was really starting to accumulate on our boats. And as we stopped for a break one time, Scott had been off taking, I think, a lot of the photos that you had just seen there. And I reached down to find that underneath of the boat, we had probably a 1/4 inch of accumulated salt. And we didn't think of that at first, because you can see here where the water had been interacting with the boat, it had almost washed it clean. So we assumed that the bottoms were fairly clean. But we had this thick crust of salt that was just causing so much drag and so much extra weight on us as we were paddling. So what we did was we took a cord, and kind of one of us on either end grabbed an end of the cord and kind of made a sawing motion from the bow to the stern of the boat to scrape all of that off. And the difference was remarkable. We went from going about 2.5 miles an hour laboriously. I mean, it took effort to go that slow. And then after cleaning off the bottoms of the boat, we were cruising at like 4 miles an hour, and it was just this huge morale boost. So we finally made it to our campsite, and I think we're both in good spirits, and we couldn't resist the opportunity to go for a swim and kind of do a little celebration. And this is my first time ever swimming in the lake, and doing it in the North Arm. It was just so incredible. You felt like like I had water wings tied to my ankles or something. My legs just kept floating up from underneath of me. So yeah, we kind of took that opportunity, and we're feeling a lot better knowing that we could make better progress the next day. So here we are again, kind of living the salty life, camping out wherever we could find level ground. And yeah, from the water. So Scott jumped out, joined me in the water, and yeah, just had a good camping experience right at sunset. Yeah. And then the next day, our goal was to go over the Causeway and then along Freeman Island and then camp at Antelope Island. And that's one, a lot of miles, but two, the challenge of getting over this Causeway was going to be significant. And we wanted to kind of set ourselves up for success. So we got up at about 4:30 in the morning, and this is me trying to make us a good breakfast so that we, could be strong and, take on the day. So here I'm making some blueberry pancakes and some scrambled eggs by headlamp. And, there's something about kind of being in your element, working on the stove while being completely out of your element in kind of an other world environment. And that morning, we got started well before sunrise, and it was a totally clear night, and the stars were out, and you could just see them reflecting on the mirror-like surface of the water. And it felt like we were paddling through stars that hour, and it was just something unlike I'd ever experienced before. It was so incredible. So another beautiful morning on the lake, and like we said, we expected it to be the roughest water of the trip, and we couldn't have been more surprised. It was just a perfect mirror, and the softest colors for the sunrises. So this is us approaching the railroad causeway, and you can actually see that there's a train going across. And then this is the channel marker for the Little Valley Harbor. And then I think Jamie had showed this picture before, but it kind of shows the trench. And I just thought that was kind of a cool photo, but she had already spoken to that. And then some kind of industrial debris near the trench that had been encrusted with salt. And then this is us landing on the causeway, kind of at perfect timing as the train had gone by. And we needed to unload our boats and find a way to get up and over. This looks less intimidating than it did as we were standing on shore. So these are actual old railroad cars that are built into the causeway to kind of build it up, and they filled them with rocks. So the spots of this were completely sheer vertical, and we had the prospect of getting hundreds of pounds of gear up and over. So that was quite a task. So here we are, kind of loaded to the max with all of our gear, trying to carry it and everything. And then we took a little time lapse of us doing that, and hopefully that'll play. All right, and we made it.
And we're at the next bird.
Oh, John Neal cannot answer this one. What is it?
Well, I need to cash up. I think I just threw us off with that picture.
Well,
Okay. There we go.
Oh, perfect. Who knows what bird this is except John Neal? and maybe April Olson. April Olson is here too.
Yeah, she'd know it. I'll just comment, this is after a windstorm on Antelope Island. And I won't say the name of the bird that'll give it away, but normally you see them out like this out on the water foraging, but it was walking the shoreline, picking through the debris that had washed up. And you can see the brine fly all over around it.
Oh, Rosalie is there. Go, Rosalie. Mike Vandenberg would rather have us show rocks to identify, please.
Okay, should I move on, Jamie, when you're collecting the comments?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I will say that the largest staging concentration of this bird in the world, 600,000 of them is on the lake. So actually there was a question put in just barely, the tugboats are still out there. So this is the other side of the causeway. We crossed in this place for a reason. This is again where the two causeways meet, and it gave us a more gradual way to get to the water, so we didn't have to negotiate going down a steep slope again. And here are two of the old tugboats that were used while building the causeway. And you know, we were getting pretty anxious at this point. We went around that amazing field of microbialites that that you saw the picture from there when Jamie was doing the circle around the lake. It was actually pretty hard to negotiate through. It went out a lot further than we thought it did, and then we headed south and a little bit east and down to Fremont Island, and we kind of quit taking pictures at this point. We were, I think, our ground crew, my daughter and my dog, were meeting us at Antelope Island, and she was going to fix us a pretty big meal, and we were kind of excited for that. Things had changed since we'd been in the South End. The brine shrimp season had started, and the brine shrimp boats were out on the water and aircraft in the air. So it was a whole different world when we came down. It was pretty interesting. We paddled along Fremont Island. One interesting thing about Fremont Island, the water bubbles up in the lake. It does in all lakes. There's methane gas and other things that come up. But along the shore of Fremont Island, about 200 yards out, there's just one after another of these areas where bubbles are coming up. And I have no idea what creates that. If somebody in the meeting tonight knows, I'd love to know why they're so prevalent there. But this is down closer to the south end of the island. We got out and stretched a little bit and then made our run down to Antelope Island. And we were running early and we were excited about it. We thought we'll have time to get out and relax a little bit, time for a good meal. And we ran into this huge field of microbialites. And it took a lot of time to work in and realize we couldn't get through it and work back out. And we had to go way out west in the lake and come back in right off the point of Buffalo Point. We actually beached pretty much on the point of Buffalo Point. This is right on the end of Buffalo Point, and this is our ground crew waiting there as we came in. And we enjoyed a sunset as we ate a delicious meal, multiple rounds. I don't think Matt and I realized how hungry we were. We put down an incredible amount of food that night, camped in the campground, and really no good place to set up a tent. So we set them up right on the cement. It was probably the most comfortable bed we'd had the whole trip. And spent that night on Antelope Island. And the next day, the goal was to go down along Antelope Island and then come back over to the Marina. And we had the sunshine, and I really love the west shore of Antelope Island. It's a spectacular place. In fact, some of the pictures you saw earlier on were taken there. But the sun was at a bad angle. We didn't take too many pictures, but I thought I do need to talk about Antelope Island just a little bit. It's an incredible place. Geologically, it has some of the oldest rock, older than what you find in the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and some of the newest rock on the continent. Amazing wildlife, but what it's really famous for is its spiders. The largest spider collection in the world, I think. And we made our way down, again, had another one of those beautiful sunrises. Here you can see the shoreline and the microbialites that have died. In fact, the picture that I showed that was taken just a few days ago was taken from right down here looking towards the kayak. So that's the other side of it. Going down, you can see Stansbury Island across the lake, and we ended the trip. And we are running late, but just really briefly, this is one of the kayaks. This is the kayak that Matt was paddling, and its name's Quandary. And I named it Quandary for a reason. These are compass points. So this is a south compass point, and the lighter color one's always north. That's a north compass point. And you know, I think in general, we know what we should do in this world. We know how we should treat the environment. We know how we should treat other people. But for various very human reasons, around the cockpit, you've got the compass point going the opposite direction. And there are just a lot of things that tempt us, and we make decisions contrary to what we know we should be doing. And I think that's what's happening with the lake right now. We know we're killing the lake. but yet we continue to have things like this lawn where this kayak was taken, you know, a European lawn that takes a lot of water. We continue to make bad decisions. And that's what needs to change. I get the question all the time, you know, how can we save the lake? And we have to change ourselves. We have to change our political systems. We have to change how we look at things. And we have to start looking at our fellow man and the earth as something to be prized, something to be treasured, and something to be preserved. And if we don't do that, I don't think we will save the lake. I don't think technology can save the lake. It's got to be a change that we make as individuals, as societies, as nations, and as a global population. It can get discouraging. And this is a quote that I tell people quite often. If you're really a searcher of truth and a believer in good, you'll fight many battles, most of which you're going to inevitably lose in a war that most surely will be won. We can't afford not to win this war. We need to do something about the environment. The Great Salt Lake's just a great indicator of what's happening globally. And it's real. Scott Weidensaul, who presented just recently with the Great Salt Lake Institute, he made a couple points besides his vast knowledge on migratory birds that were it was just fascinating. Several times he emphasized, we need to do things differently. We need to reach over boundaries. We need to start working with people we haven't worked with. We need to learn how to understand each other and how critical that's going to be to save migratory birds and to save the world. And he made another point. Jamie asked him, you know, what his super bird would be, and he said the raven, because ravens have fun when they're flying. And I think that was a good point. We need to do these things, but we can't get discouraged. We have to have fun. We need to stay positive. And we have gone long tonight, but Jamie, do we have time for question and answers?
Yeah, we totally do. I have a million questions.
Okay.
And I would like to add, I would encourage all of the people who are here to bear witness, go to the lake, see it for yourself and watch it, because this is definitely a time of change. And I think, you know, one of the questions that we have in our Q&A is like, well, what do I do? Like, what is that thing that I do? And I have a hard time answering that, because we have to do everything. We have to change our behaviors, we have to change our laws, and we have to kind of throw like spaghetti at the wall, and there's not a real, you know, there's not a silver bullet. Like, we have to do everything. And so I think in the next couple months, Great Salt Lake Institute will be unveiling a campaign where we will be definitely kind of throwing out more solutions, more concrete solutions. But if you want to know what to do for the lake right now, I would say go look at it, go see it, witness it right now, because it's very stark, and it's very scary, even if you haven't been out there ever before. So go out there, and I would say write your legislators. And maybe you don't know what to write. What's that thing that you're asking? That's okay. I would tell your legislator that you really care about Great Salt Lake, and it's important for our humans and our birds and our economy and our ecosystem and all of it. And so I think, you know, don't be worried and don't be stressed, and maybe go to a place of discomfort like Scott did when he told the story about the folklore, the Great Salt Lake monster, or that Matt did when he was, you know, embarking on this kind of unknown tour, not being a kayaker and not knowing Great Salt Lake. So that doesn't sound very concrete, but I think that's what we can do right now. I would love to invite questions, and I have 3 questions in my head, and I'm not going to ask all of them, but I want you to know the first question I want to ask, and Matt, you can turn your camera on if you want. I was wondering, as we were listening, if you were a bird nerd, Matt, before you went, or did Scott kind of turn you into a bird nerd? And you don't have to answer. The other question that kept going through my head was, did you really wear life vests the whole time? I mean, Great Salt Lake is very floaty, and I see that you have life vests on, and I was curious about that. And that's actually not the real answer that I'm that's not a real question I want you to answer. The one I want you to answer, both Matt and Scott, is, do you like sunsets or sunrises at Great Salt Lake better?
I'll let Matt go first.
Yeah, so I think I learned more in the first day about birds on this trip than my entire base of knowledge going into it. So no, not going into it as a bird nerd, but definitely coming away with a huge appreciation. And yeah, learned a lot about the birds in the area. And yeah, the jacket stayed on the entire time. I don't know. Maybe it's just like I think an experienced person would keep the jacket on, and as an inexperienced person, I also really wanted to keep my jacket on. You know, like every now and then, like your paddle, like I would catch a wave like a little bit funny, and it was incredible how much it would like twist me or you know make me kind of off balance real quick. So you know, I definitely wasn't going to take any risks there. Yeah.
And favorite time of day was the third.
Sunrises, most definitely.
And for me, I agree with the answers on the earlier one. For me, it's sunset. For me, it's sunset. I think Matt likes to look forward, and I guess I like to relax in the evening. So.
And I have a question from Jan. Were you mostly cold? Like, would have you done it earlier in the year if you had to do it again? Would you make any equipment changes or change your route?
Is that for me or Matt? Or,
either one of you.
I'll start and I'll let Matt chime in. So we actually timed it pretty good. We were trying to avoid the real heat of summer, which carried on this summer, and smoke that was actually a big health concern. And so we waited till smoke dissipated, and we got a little bit cooler temperatures, but we were also getting shorter days, so we couldn't wait very much longer. And we delayed the trip by 2 days because we saw a windstorm coming in, and the windstorm was significant. The winds got up to 48 miles an hour on the lake, and we were glad we missed that. We headed out the next morning, and we got back 2 days before another real significant wind event. So I think we timed it pretty well. You know, my daughter, we were together enjoying some butternut squash soup just a few days ago. My daughter asked, would you do it again? And Matt and I kind of looked at each other and we said, yes, we do it in a heartbeat again. And we would do things differently. We would have more preparation. In fact, you know, I saw at least 50 things that we misinterpreted, and, you know, the experts that are on tonight were correcting us as we went. We really appreciated that. I think we'd spend a lot more time gaining more understanding than we have of the lake. We'd probably cut the trip in pieces so we could spend more time as we went. I love to take serious photography, but the pace we had to keep kind of only allowed for snapshot photography. You really didn't have time to slow down and to get it into that zone where you really interpreted things. So I think we both really increased the science and the art aspect of the trip. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I thought our timing was good. I definitely preferred the cooler temperatures to the warmer ones. You know, it was a lot easier to throw on a knit hat and some gloves, but the heat and the sun was just, you know, could be relentless out there. And, you know, I think we only hit 78 degrees or something like that on one of the days. And it just felt so hot, especially getting the reflection off the water. So cooler was definitely preferred. And then as far as like gear and equipment goes, maybe some like padded shorts or something like that. That would be something I could think of to change in my gear selection, but otherwise, no, I thought the boats were awesome, and yeah.
Soren Simonson wants to know if he can go next time. Okay, yeah.
Boat, Scott.
Anybody who wants to try it, I've got plenty of boats. I can equip about 20 people. So,
how about, does water run into the lake on the north end from Locomotive Springs? Is it mostly diverted by irrigation of groundwater in the area? Do you know?
So say that one again. I'm sorry.
Does any water run into the lake on the north end from Locomotive Springs? Is it mostly diverted by irrigation of groundwater in the area?
it is. So locomotive springs are much lower now than they used to be. And I don't know this. I'm sure there's somebody in the group that does, but I've assumed it's because of the irrigation they've started doing just north of locomotive springs. And you used to get kind of more of a damp ground coming down from locomotive springs than you do now. So I don't know if it's because the shoreline's extended so far, or there's less water seeping, or a combination of that. But you definitely get that. Water seepage makes a big difference. Just north of the Causeway, there's evaporation ponds that the trench that you talked about start out before they go over to promontory. And there's seepage there, and it makes it so you really can't land and camp there. You're just kind of in a muck there. So seepage can actually go long ways, it seems like, through that soil, and you're not seeing much coming down from locomotive springs.
And Andy says it runs south and disappears into the sands before reaching the shore of the lake. Andy is the pilot that took Bonnie and I on the flight earlier that we showed you. He knows the lake probably better than most people I know. I think Scott and Andy might be hand in
the
hand.
way that they see it is so different.
Yeah.
I don't know if Mike Vandenberg or someone from UGS is on, but I know they've been up at Locomotive Springs and thinking a lot more about springs. UGS is looking now at groundwater and how it's feeding the lake. So we're going to hear more and more about that in the coming year. So I think that's going to be really fun questions that the Utah Geologic Survey is answering. Oh, Mike says yes.
All the springs, along Promontory Point and a few that are actually down further, none of those were really reaching the lake except for one, and we took some photographs there. We really wanted to go over and check out the springs and document what was living there, but it's hard ground to move through, and you're a long ways out. Like I say, we had to make miles. That's something we do differently. We build in time to do things like that. But yeah, I think under the surface, that water still makes it to the lake to some degree, but you're not seeing it on the surface for the most part.
Yeah. So I have a question that I think will be really good to end on, unless anybody else, has anything. Ray wants to know, also Hydran. Oh, wait, first I have to say, there were some winners, and I can't remember why. I just wrote them down. I can't remember what bird they got. Hydran Kubiesa is a teacher who has been I've been working with. You definitely won a book. You told us a lot of stories about eared grebes and different things. I'll send you another book. Trish Ackley is the naturalist and one of the conservation officers out at Antelope Island State Park, who also won a book for what she told us. And then April Olson, I'm glad to send you a book, April. It's thank you for coming, and thank you for doing all of this. But Ray wants to know, how are ski resorts, the brine shrimp industry, and other businesses that rely on the Great Salt Lake voicing their concerns about the decline of Great Salt Lake? And I was at a Salinity Advisory Council meeting yesterday, and I think that there was this beautiful example of how everybody is working together right now and trying to really decide the fate of Great Salt Lake. And the people who were involved with this were both state and federal agency folks, scientists and managers. There were people from academia, there were people from the brine shrimp industry and from mineral industry that were all sitting around a virtual table. Some were sitting around a physical table, others were around a virtual table, and everybody was working together to really uncover kind of some of these nuances of Great Salt Lake that we need to understand, because it is a highly managed system. And the cool thing is people have been studying this for decades, and it's so neat to see all of this information that has been collected over decades and all of these relationships that people have working together, going into this fabric of saving a Great Salt Lake. So I think both brine shrimp industry, mineral industries, and other businesses are really taking part and being a part of protecting Great Salt Lake. We're all working together with this common goal of a sustainable Great Salt Lake. So I don't know if it will fall on deaf ears. I don't think so. I have hope. I don't know.
Jamie, before we end also, I think Matt and I both would like to express our appreciation for all the help we had with this. As Matt mentioned, you can't just go out and kayak and camp on the Great Salt Lake. It's not legal, and there's quite a permitting process there. And we worked with the various state agencies. Forestry is the one that actually controls the sovereign lands, and they helped us through the fairly complex permitting process. And it was somewhat new for them too. Not that they don't issue a lot of permits, but they've never done it for a couple of crazy kayakers before. And the various agencies, the biologists working on the lake, you know, the institutes, the Great Salt Lake Institute, the Friends of Great Salt Lake, the Audubon, so much help from them. The brine shrimpers, you know, it was interesting. Coordinated a lot with them because they're the ones that understand the weather on the lake. They live out there at a really bad time of year. And they're also the most likely ones to get to us for rescue, and coordinating with one of the top people in the brine shrimp company. And I mentioned, you know, we were talking about communications on the south side of the causeway. And I said, you know, once we cross the causeway, I think we're pretty much on our own. Nobody's going to rescue us up there. And he very sincerely said, I'll get you out of the water. I'll get a boat in there. We'll get in there. If you need help, we'll be there, you know. And we coordinated a lot with them. We actually kept communications going with them the whole time. But the industry, the scientists, all of the universities had people helping us, and really like to express our appreciation. They really helped make this trip be a success.
Well, thank you, Scott and Matt. Thank you for documenting all of this. Thank you for sharing it with us. I know that you have been doing a lot of, you know, public talks, and we're just really excited that you came and showed us your pictures. And I'm sure that there will be lots to come after this. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, and we'll keep the list of everybody that wants to go with next year.
Yeah. We'll be on it. And thank you for everyone who is looking at the lake right now and bearing witness. We're really, it's so heartwarming to know so many lake lovers are out there. Thank you.